The following talk is taken from the Spirit Release Forum Conference held in London in June 2013 with the theme of Spirit Release, helping lost souls move into the light. This talk by Natalia O'Sullivan is entitled The Ancestral Continuum, How the Ancestors Affect Us.
The next subject or the next speaker is talking about a subject which is very close to my heart. It's all to do with the ancestors. And I first got involved with this within a small group that I was running many, many years ago, probably 15 plus 20 years ago. And as I was running this group, I suddenly sort of thought, one of the things we really started to look at was the ancestors. And we'd never really given them too much thought before. And my gosh, it was like taking the lid off of a boiling kettle. The amount of information that came out and the power of this ancestral stream, the way it impacts upon us, is immense. And I also know from my own experience, two things. Well, one of the things I discovered when I started to go back into my ancestors was finding that my grandmother, who had actually unfortunately passed over in a mental hospital, was still stuck and earthbound. And my grandfather, who I never knew, but I suspect died in the First World War, was still stuck. So when I was able to communicate with both of them, to find out what was going on as part of this release, and then bring them together, it was like, wow, it just made a huge shift energetically, and they were both able to then pass through to the light. And the interesting thing, my father, who didn't want to know anything about all this side, suddenly felt a great shift within him, and his whole attitude started to change. So it is with great delight that I'm asking Natalia O'Sullivan to come and speak about this whole theme and subject. She's a healer and psychic with a huge number of years of experience, and is one of the founders of the Soul Rescuers Foundation course. So, Natalia, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you for David inviting me today. It's the first time I've worked with David. Actually, we've met each other. And I'm delighted to be here because everyone seems to know what they're talking about, which I think is amazing, especially in this industry, and also the great audience as well. And so what I'm going to be doing is talking to you about one of my favourite subjects to do with the work that I do, which is ancestors. And I didn't want to put a title about, releasing earthbound ancestors. I wanted to do something to do with how they affect us, because there are two levels with them. They're not just to do with something that we have to release and let go of or destroy or somehow disengage with it. There is something that we have to learn to embrace. And so what I wanted to do is to go through a few stories and explanations, but I wanted to end my little talk about what you can all do to help your ancestors as well, because there are some very powerful, simple ways of acknowledging and releasing and healing our own heritage. So anyway, so the story begins with my journey. I think I have always communicated with ancestors ever since I was little, and I don't know how many of you out here have the same thing. It's not easy, I have to say, and I wish sometimes, especially when I was growing up, that I wasn't the one that was awake, that could see them and feel them and sense them around me. So I probably would say 3 years old was my first memory of knowing them. Now, I've got to just explain a little bit about my background. So the way that I kind of like to teach is for you to go, I tell you my story, then you think about your own. So my story began in London, and I was brought up in Mortlake. And I was born in Hammersmith Hospital, but my parents are not English. I have no English blood, or with the surname. My husband's half Irish, half English. So I'm Natalia Kovacs. So my father's Hungarian, and my mother's Spanish. And I don't know how they spoke to each other, because my mother's English has never been very good, and my father's English was better. So they met, I think it was love. Let's put it that way. I think it was more passion. So they met each other, I was born, and of course you would think, how would I feel my own heritage in a household that had no roots in the land. Oh dear, they do follow. They go across the water, by the way, so it doesn't matter how far away you may want to go away from your family, they still follow you. So I recognised, I think what I didn't understand is which one was most disturbing for me. So you have this huge Hungarian ancestry and a big Spanish ancestry. But I think because the Hungarians are very funny, they all go, oh, they call me Spanish, because they think I'm more Spanish looking. So I realised as I was growing up, and something I wrote about in my book was the story of my grandfather. Now he was, I didn't know anything about him when I was little, but I used to have this dream about being blindfolded. And it was very annoying. I always used to think, God, can I just pull the blindfold off? But I couldn't, and I had to walk through one room into another. And as I walked through, there was a doorway, and this light was coming through the doorway, and I kept seeing all these men's shoes under the door. And I thought, this is very strange. And as soon as I did that, the dream disappeared. So you have these dreams, and you think, yes, whatever, I'm having this dream. And then as a teenager, I said to my mum, look, I have this really annoying dream that I got this blindfold. She said, oh my God, I had this dream. And I said, well, that's very odd. I said, why do you think you had this dream? She said, oh, who knows? That's how she speaks. Oh, you know, don't make things up now, you've got big imagination. So anyway, so of course I didn't think anything of it. Through my 20s, I met my husband. We went back to Spain because I wanted him to meet my family because I have a very strong relationship with them. And we went there, and the family said, oh, we're moving your grandfather's grave, which they do sometimes, from this other plot to the family plot. And I said, well, why are you doing that? And they said, oh, no, it's... And then the story comes out. Because I knew, my mum's saying, I don't know, I was 18 months old when he died. So the story goes into that he was a judge. I'm going to keep it simple, the judge in the Spanish Civil War. And he believed, he was a big socialist, and he was very strong and kind of, he believed in human rights. He was a wonderful man. And of course, anyone who knows Spanish history, Franco didn't like intellectuals, socialists, and so they did a kangaroo court and they executed him. My cousin said to me, oh, so what about this dream I had? He said, well, actually, it could be him. So he took me to the prison, he showed me the walk that they had to take, and there were 7 men. I went to see an archivist. Then they showed me all these letters. So this is the beginning of saying, well, isn't that interesting? Now, the more I unraveled it, the more I realised, not only was he, you could say earthbound, like David's answer, but I don't think he was. He felt he was taken out too early. So he didn't die going, I don't know who I am. He died going, I cannot let go of my family. So he felt that his girls were too little, he left his wife with no money. So he spent a long time kind of trying to get someone to go, look, I'm here. No one noticed. And so taking on his legacy made me realise how much of this support, he became a guardian to me. So he's not an earthbound ancestor. I thought, I like him. I like his support, I like his wisdom and his energy. And my cousins are the same about him. So that's how I began the journey. But to go beyond that, to do with the lessons of the day, I realised as well that often I used to go to my family home, and if there were only earthbound ancestors, I used to have some terrible dreams. I used to dream their death. I used to wake up feeling unwell and not sure. And then gradually as you get older, through my teens, as I started to develop psychically, I realised by going to people's houses, their ancestors all wanted to have a quick chat. And then I have to say, I have to curb that a little bit. And I still, my husband says, please, if we have someone for dinner, you have no idea how serious this is. If you have someone for dinner, would you mind, at the end of your bottle of wine, you do not start channeling, because they come in. And then the other night we had an incident. My friend's mother died. I didn't tell her, she's not here. And I could feel it, and she's a terrible dater. She has terrible boyfriend problems. And I just felt, I said, Terry, I'm really itchy. I'm itchy, scratchy. She's coming, every time I go to the loo, she's going, please, just tell her not to go out with him. So I slipped it in. I didn't mention the mother. I went, it's going to be a disaster. Anyway, so she looked very glum, and I thought, Terry said to me, I told you not to do it. I said she was there. So in the end, she did text me, and there was the story came out. Actually, she texted me, she said, thank you, it was a disaster. But that doesn't always happen. So it's kind of interesting how we have these, and I want to talk a little bit more about the characters like her dead mother, who isn't earthbound, but she died too young. The stories of those people, like I was in a holiday place, and my friend ran this hotel. He had a Japanese girl working for him, this is years ago, Again, too many cocktails. I felt him coming up to me, like this. And she was a disaster, I have to say. I kept saying to my friend, before I knew her dad was around, I said, she's got to sort herself out. She's running away from her family, there's big drama. And in the end, I went, oh, come on, I'm going to have to tell her, your dead father's here. And you are a disaster. Your mother needs you at home, would you just stop it? Anyway, so she decided to have a little fainting fit, which made me realise that you have to do these things appropriately. And then the next day, anyway, so I said to her, I'm really, really sorry. My friend who ran the hotel, he said, you are just a nightmare. So he made me go, he took me and a Japanese girl to have a meeting the next day, and she said thank you. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not an uncontrolled psychic, by the way. It's kind of knowing you get this like build-up, and this power that comes over you. Now, so these are lovely. So I knew from the moment that the Japanese gentleman could tell his daughter go home and she was getting on the ship, he disappeared. I knew that my grandfather, once his story's been told, he must be so beside himself, because now he's in a book. And there are more. So my friend, who's an archivist, said to me, oh my God, we could do a whole book on him. He was amazing, and his family. So it's amazing how, you know, some of these ancestors that we have, they just want to go, look, I am here, I care about you, I love you, let me help you. Now, there are also some terrible stories about those that died very badly. And our responsibility, now you could say, well, oh look, she's psychic, she does this, so she can communicate with them. I always say to everyone has an ancestor. 1, 2, 5 million of them, generations and generations. We are the product, we are the bloodlines of our family tree. And what we forget, what I've noticed with spiritual practice, whether it's kind of what I call really esoteric or very kind of grass level as we're talking about, there is not enough in Europe, except for our kind of All Souls Day, to acknowledge our ancestral relationships. How we think that they're not behind us, how we think that they're not in our blood, how we think that when we get married and have our children, that they're not there at the birth. I don't know what's wrong with us. Our education, we've forgotten. So my desire is to educate people going, you know, it's not all spooky, it's all really healthy and positive. It can make you feel really strong and helpful. And I'm going to tell you a little bit later about how we can utilize the positive. It's not always negative. So swinging back to the, oh my goodness, the earthbounds, part of the day. Very interesting because, you know, I've got a couple of stories. I mean, I have my story, which wasn't as sort of traumatic. But when I went to Hungary, and I have another great story as well, when I went to Hungary for the first time, I used to have these terrible dreams. And I used to wake up, some of the examples that Archibald was talking about, I felt like I was choking, I was paralysed, I couldn't get out, I couldn't wake up, and really quite physical poltergeist kind of ghost in the family home. The family have been living there for 6 centuries, so, you know, it's just the same plot of land that they've farmed and farmed and farmed. And so I kept having this dream, and then I could see her when I could push her out, and imagine I was about, what, 11? I could see her face moving away, and it was a woman. And I kept dreaming her, until eventually I said to my auntie, I'm just, you know, I thought, God, she's so Catholic, how do I discuss this? And I'm 11. So she said, right, yes, there was someone that died. And of course, there was a woman that died who'd lost her husband at the turn of the century. And I think she had mental health problems. She was locked away, pushed away from the family. So I thought, what should I do? My instinct was, because I'm very kind of under the roots Catholic, I love a bit of church, love a bit of mass, and I love a bit of graveyards, actually. I love graveyards. So I just thought, oh, let's combine all these together. So I went to mass, lit a candle for her, went to the grave, and I never had dreamt about her again. So it's very interesting about having these earthbounds, about having that legacy. This is also another little strand, that we do know instinctively, if we're allowed to be ourselves, what to do for our family. And how we know when something isn't quite right. I do believe everybody knows. If I just tap into somebody and just say, oh, I never feel anything, I don't know anything, I just go, all right. Right, let's have a little chat. And there are symptoms, there are experiences, there are senses that you have to know when something's not quite right with your family, or with your sister, or with your mother, or with an auntie. or with someone, as soon as, you know when you feel it, is when you're all gathered. It's like this. I mean, I'm very sensitive, so it absolutely drives me crazy. I have 3 children. My middle son, the other 2 go, oh yes, I know what it's like, let's just switch off. He feels, undulates him like this, because there is unresolved, unspoken issues. And I'm always one for saying, actually, when you feel that, maybe someone needs some help. Maybe there needs to be a bit of a conversation. And you know what it's like. I'm sure some of you here have got families that go, please don't mention that, don't talk about that. You know, don't be difficult.
Something's trying to get in.
Help! It's saying, I can hear a conversation. So yes, so everyone has a tool. And so sometimes the earthboundness, I'm going to give you an example of someone who's attached, who's an earthbound, and I'll give you an example when it's atmospheric, because there's 2 or 3 issues that go further back through the family tree. So I'm going to stay with that journey first. So what happens is when you all gather, this is a symptom. It's very interesting. I kind of always go, it's so interesting when you go back through the family tree, what you can find. So you will then begin to sense why when at the marriages and funerals and gatherings and dinners, why you feel when you're having to sit next to Auntie Flo. Auntie Flo is carrying something with her. Or why is it that you and your sister or your mother argue always about the same thing? Is it money? Is it religion? Is it that you are this or that? Or you're not allowed to be like this? So there's always the same agendas that go like this. They move through the family tree. So what happens if you're very clever and you go, actually I want to resolve this for me, for my family and my children, I'm going to plunge a little bit into what's going on here. Now often you can't say to Auntie Flo, why are you such a neurotic? Okay, that's really got to go down a tree, isn't it? So you don't say to Auntie Flo, you're a neurotic. You actually go and ask your family what happened to her in her childhood. You find out who her parents were. You find out also what did her parents do? Was there any disasters, any secrets? And oh my God, it's like, you know, honestly, it's like a novel. Amazing amount of information starts to step out. Because you will find there are things like hidden secrets, when there's agendas that no one wants to like suppress. There's always agendas in every family, but the suppression, excuse me, is a lot to do with the fact that something happened, somebody went to prison, somebody raped somebody, somebody murdered somebody, somebody had mental health issues, and no one wanted to talk about it. There's a lot of lids. And then you're all out of wedlock marriages, children lost, deaths. And so you have all these energies that really come through. And I call those more collective energy. And so what happens, you at the bottom, let's say you're at the bottom of your line of family, or you may not be, or you have a child, and you say there's behavioural issues. This is where the psychological and emotional anxiety come in. So you just, on the big scale, which I deal with sometimes, are people who are manic depressive, suicidal, deep mental health issues. And although I'm not an expert, I always refer people that are very sick that way, but I can guarantee the poor souls, it is genetic. There is a journey that runs through, and it is like a black river that runs through. And certainly you can have a family of 5, and why the one in the middle has opened themselves up for that experience, I do not know. I sometimes think sometimes that soul needed to learn that. So you open, you go, give me that gene pool, I can handle it. Or someone else has nothing at all. And I've seen complications like food disorders, OCD. I mean, you'd say this is all mental health umbrella, but it is, where do you think it came from? And so some of it, you know, could happen where there are triggers in childhood, where they've had traumas, and it awakens it like that. But generally you'll find a person that has it will start to awaken to it during their teens. If something happens in the brain or in the function. And I find that it really helps if you're not very sick, you're like mild sick, which I call the anxiety, character, your funny foibles. You kind of know when you're a bit odd. I always say, if you know you're a little bit odd, but you're not sick, but you know that little oddness is not yours. It could be about food, it could be about sex, it's always the simple things. It's all real brass kind of life things, intimacy. And so you can't say that your parents treated you any different to your brothers or sisters, but why are you a bit weird in those areas? And so there's some amazing work that's out there now. Constellations therapy is wonderful. The work that we do, the work that David does, where we can actually kind of work with that. That's kind of simple once you recognise it. And even if you're a practitioner, sometimes you need to look at your client and think, actually, you need to ask them to step away or look down the family tree and see what's not causing them their problems. So this is what I call collective, because one person was sick, collective because one person had died. Now, the earthbounds are very interesting. You've got two levels of earthbounds. You've got the piggybackers, and what they do, they can go down through centuries. They get away, they're a little bit like, I call them the kind of the zombie dead, really, but they are very awake and they can be very naughty. So they kind of piggyback the family. And an example was, when I was little, I used to get really scared to go to the toilet when you were very small, because I used to see and sense this very white, I mean, he was very white, grey-haired man with a beard, and I thought it was just me making up. It wasn't quite, because it was what you, Archibald, was saying about the smoky. I thought, I can't actually see who this person is, and it could be in my dreams. So it wasn't as physical as some of the other ancestors that I felt. So we never dealt with this until I had my son Ossian, the middle one. He used to wake up between 3 and 6, night after night, going on about the white man sitting on the end of his bed with a beard. And I realised that this soul, I mean, he doesn't even go, we went through the Hungarian records, I can't even see where he belongs. It must be, I'd say, 5, 6 generations. They've sent me loads of pictures, he's not in any of them. But I think he has a tendency for alcoholism, for depression, and he was definitely with my dad. My dad, he used to wake up and see him, so I used to know. So we've done, that's harder because they're tricky. It's a bit like the ghosts you were talking about. You have to work really, a bit like a detective. You have to catch them, they have to leave you clues, and you have to arrest them, so to speak. So they're not always the easiest ones. The easier ones that are problematic, but actually they're calling out for help, is there is a story I wrote in the book where I interviewed a girl called Tanya. She came to see me about something else, and I thought, she's got an earthbound somebody with her, I just can tell. So I said, did you have any weird dreams when you were growing up? Blah, blah, blah. She said, I always dreamt that I was in a fire and the house was burning down. And she said, and then the dream disappears. And I thought, oh, I get it. Okay, so let's go and talk about it. She said, well, I wake up with that paralysis. You know, I don't know if any of you have done that. It's horrible. Not nice, where you wake up and you know there's something with you and you can't move because she's very sensitive. So I said, well, go and ask your mum. She was Lebanese. She went and asked the mum. The whole family had moved to Africa. He was working there. He was a great-grandfather, a lovely house, and by accident he was a bit grumpy. He was a grumpy old man, she said. He went and he said to his son, oh, you're so useless, I'll do it. Made himself a coffee, left everything lit. The house burnt down. He was the only one who died. And so I said, well, let's just do some work on that. And he actually, all he wanted to do, because I am, you know, was to speak to her, to say that, you know, this has happened, I'm really sorry I did it. He felt that he devastated the whole family. As soon as he said what he needed to say, he disappeared. Like he vanished. It's like, you know, one of those photographs where you kind of got someone's face and then they disappear out of the picture. And so that, to me, that was just, when those things happen, it's a bit like when you were healing houses or places and the ghost release, the light comes in, it is amazing. So those are the kind of two earthbounds, the ones, the piggybackers and those. So you have to kind of, some of your family members don't have any of that. I mean, but it's the clients that come and see you, it's the situations where people complain that they've got some earthbound. I always go, let's have a look at your family tree first, and then we'll see what's going on. Because not all often, once you are like a detective, you can sort out the differences. So, what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about how to kind of recognise the symptoms and how to heal it. I think. Okay. So I've done I like a little kind of spider thing. So if you want to do some work on yourself, that's always the best way. You put yourself in the middle. There's some exercises in the book that I've written. I thought people need to know they can do it themselves. Put yourself in the middle, and then just write down. I always put like a baby picture of me. Let's say put the picture of you when you started to feel good and bad about your family. So you could be 7, 14, 12. Could be when you got married. Sometimes people love their family, and as soon as they marry someone, their family might not like the ancestors on one side, might not like the others. And then you're seeing the conflict. Sometimes it's when you have your children. you can feel there's a bit of conflict going on. Very interesting. It's sort of amazing how you can work out that moment. Even if you're adopted, I always find it's very interesting writing this book. I have to say it was twice the size it is. I could have probably made 3 volumes. You know, the case studies are incredible. So adoption is also interesting because I always say to people, well, look at both. You know, you came down that bloodline. It's important if you know who they are. But also, your adopted family was chosen for you. So there's something about your connection with them. So you put yourself in the middle, and then I want you to ask yourself, what is the difference between me and them? Now you think, well, oh my God, how do I break that down? It takes it, you have to just get your head around it. Now there's some very simple characteristics. One, I always think self-awareness is the most powerful tool. So it's by knowing who you are and what you enjoy. Now some of your inheritance is amazing. You can play the piano. You've got a great ear. We can cook in our family, honestly, cook a storm. That's what we're mad about food. So we kind of food it. Some people it's the theatre, some people it's kindness, some people it's just being a mother. You know, there's an amazing heritage that comes through. I like that. I know it's not 100% me, I know it's me, if you know what I mean. There's a real wrapping about. And we're very loving in our family. That's it. Well, however crazy we are sometimes, there's a lot of cuddles. So you've got that positive, but we can be very critical, judgmental, and kind of mean-spirited at times. So you kind of know. So you've got to draw a little circle of all those emotions, and then I want you to ask yourselves: are you the rescuer in the family? Are you there to rescue? Why am I? Am I not? I don't know if I ought to. But do you have symptoms of that? Do you feel that you may have to rescue a couple of people? Maybe there's just a couple of people in your family that you might need to rescue. And then I put down here how you can help. Now, it's very interesting. I always say to people, you know, evangelical healers always amuse me. Now, bear in mind, try and just fix yourself. Because if you're anything like how I was when in my 20s, I wanted to fix you all. So once you get excited, try and limit yourself a little bit, because actually no one will thank you for it. So, so bring the story back to you, and bring the story to those in your family that are like-minded, those who are interested. And what really works on just a simple scale is 2 things. One is to have a ceremony for the family. So you could have your brother or your sister or your nephew, and they go, yeah, I love this. Let's get the family pictures out. Let's make an altar. Let's make a table here. Let's put them all out. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about our auntie had 8 kids and lost 2. Let's talk about, you know, let's just, I mean, I have to say, we prepared for a smoky atmosphere. As they come up. But because you're making it a ceremony, you're not just doing it willy-nilly, you're actually saying, you're calling, I always call, archangels are really good with ancestors. They're like the big social worker team. Go there and go to your God. Always call them first. Then get your books out and buy them presents. Look at that, beautiful flowers, candle, their favourite gifts, bits of food, and you just lay it out like a feast. That's what they do in South America still, that's what they do in Africa still, China. Feast, we used to do it. Honestly, it's instinctive, you'll go, oh, I love this. So you start building up, and then what you do is that part of them telling their story, you honour them. You can sit and pray to them, you meditate, you thank them. I mean, I have to say, I come away from that experience going, my whole body just calm, my nervous, everything goes, that's all they wanted. So otherwise, they give you all this noise. What about me? And also, they help with family. So I have a very interesting mother. So what happens as my mother's getting older, because I also want to talk about when the journey of the parents or the children or your husband going to die, that's when the ancestors are super helpful. Super unhelpful sometimes, but mostly super helpful. I think dying a good death, when you've been given the chance to be loved, to express yourself, not abandoned, rejected, hurt, stops that person becoming earthbound. Stops you becoming earthbound. When you can leave a legacy, you are an ancestor, don't forget. Because when you go, how will you be remembered? Selfish, moaning, interfering, or loving, caring, sharing. It's up to you. You could be, I don't take care of people, look at her. You know, you have to be yourself, but you have to leave something, because that also makes your bloodline very healthy. And if you can't do that, maybe it's time to think about it. And also, giving a little bit of compassion, even to the members of your family that you're not 100% like. It's amazing how a little bit of love, a little bit of forgiveness goes a long way. Again, another bit of medicine to calm the family tree down. Also, there is a very simple exercise that you can do. If you've got a family member that drives like that, there's a very powerful way called, which I put in the book because I think it's simple, right? If you can draw, it's a figure of 8. Okay, you can even write notes and do it now. Figure of 8. You put a picture. You can, let's say it's you and the issue. So my friend who told me about this, it was her and her mum as her mum was dying. She had a terrible relationship with her mother. Aristocratic French woman. She was the eldest of 8 and was very picked on. So she said, I have to heal this. So she put a picture of herself in one figure 8, picture of her mother in the other. And every night, she just had it out on her bedside table, she lit a candle for her and her mother, and she just prayed. And she said, please, I forgive her, I love her, I forgive her, I love her. She did it for 10 nights. And after the 5th night, her mum kept phoning her, because I hadn't spoken for a while, and she knew this was something started to soften. And it is intention. You think, well, how can that work? It is intention, because she started to put some love behind a lot of hurt. Now, I'm not saying everyone, if you've been raped and pillaged and burnt or whatever, by an ancestor, it's slightly harder. So forgiveness, you have to go a bit of therapy and then you can do figure of 8. Okay. By the way, so there's an extreme. But if it's just normal emotional stuff, that's the magic. The other thing that really works, I have a family altar. I think I love altars. I had that since I was a child. I love a little bit of altar somewhere. So I think every flat surface in my house is one, isn't it? So I have, you know, it's really funny. I collect things like I'm like a small child. So I have a bit for the family, and it's lovely. I have it in my healing room now. I never used to move them in there because I didn't like them for a long time, but now I love them. So they're allowed in my healing room, and that's great. So if I need some help, my children are being difficult, or I've got my mum who's not very well, it's amazing. Just lighting a candle, saying something, asking for help, so it's not all down to you. It's amazing. My mum has become softer since I've done that. I feel her mother around and her sister around a lot. When I need their help, and she's driving me crazy, it's amazing. She suddenly gets a bit wise. I thought, oh, so somebody's whispering in her ear. So that really helps. Finally, oh yes. So the other 2 short things, that's something to think about, which we can't resolve today, is places of your ancestors. Now, that means, you know, the little method of healing that means that you go to the place where your ancestors come from. Now, it's interesting, very quickly, I went to work in America because the book's been launched there, and interesting, most of the African American people came to all my events, and I was on the radio mainly to African Americans. Very interesting, they really want to find out what's happening. Now, they talked about the fact that because their ancestors are slaves, there is a cut-off point, they can't go any further from the first slave that came over. They're disconnected, something with some of us in your name think that. But actually, that's it, stops. They don't even know where they came from in Africa. So what one girl did, she was very brave, she actually went across the world to every place that her family have ever lived. But she's like this, oh, I will go across the world and I will heal them all. Good for her, and I have to say amazing, and she knew she could do it. Some of those people need to go to the one that got freed. Sometimes we need to go to that point, that's all we know. If that's as far back as you can go, that is enough. And I always go to the local church, I always go to the house, I go to the land, I bless it, and I give thanks to my family that live there. It is enough. Something simple like that, or leaving flowers in the grave, is enough. And finally, if you have found there is an awful lot of problems in your family, there are very simple exercises, like we call it Stairway to Heaven, where we call the archangels, especially Michael, and you have to do a ritual. Never do it on your own. Always have 2 or 3 people, or a medium, or someone you trust, to be able to put all those family members that need healing, to be able to do like a journey for them to disappear. And we do this in our class when we do any ancestral work, and it is like magic. It just feels like the whole light is lifted, or lifts them into the light. Anyway, I think I've finished now.
Yes.
well, there's probably a few more minutes.
Oh, is there? Oh, good. You know me, I can go on and on.
Quarter past.
Great, okay, we'll carry on. I'll just finish off what I was saying. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to finish off, which is kind of a nice softening kind of end to this, was to do with finding out your ancestral guide or guardian. Who is the ancestor that supports you? Now, the first thing I want to say about that is that, interesting, when you were born, you had them there with you. You know, I'm here, the good and the bad, but the good, somebody good, not just your angel and your guide, but there would be an ancestor that was catching you as you were born. Sometimes we don't discover them for sometimes generations. You might have to be either at the extreme as the point of death, and you go, oh my God, where have you been? You came then, and then you arrived now, and I'm off. That's their job. And they'll say to you, that's all I've been paid for. Yeah. The in-between, thank God for the in-betweeners, are the ones that come and take you through different parts of your journey. And I'm so grateful to them. And I have ones that I didn't know and the ones that I did. And the ones that I did help me keep connected to the ones that I've never met. And so I have my Spanish grandmother who, it doesn't need me, she said, I don't need it, need me. So I have my grandfather's father who suddenly appeared. And I have to say, he is a ball of fun. I think I felt him since I was little. So you will know that you go through different phases in your life that you need through your education, through your relationships, through your marriages, through being a parent, through your businesses, through being spiritual. And I think it's just a little journey of, kind of experiencing and acknowledging them and letting them in, because you can feel it, and letting them come in and hold your hand through your life. It just makes us feel spiritually a little bit more protected. Great, that's what I wanted to finish off.
Thank you. I mean, that's so wonderful. It encapsulates practically all the work, which also I would have totally endorsed all of the things you were saying. From my own experience, the two things that the ancestors have really come out, and this is working with many, many people on this, is one, to be acknowledged, and secondly, to be forgiven because of any issues or traumas that are going on. And actually, we have, although maybe the ancestors back to the great-grandparents are the most significant, you don't have to go back too many generations, where you find you've got more ancestors than the total world population. So actually what it tells us is we're all sort of connected. Yes. And so I think it's a really fascinating subject. It's really important, and I would encourage all of you to buy Natalia's book, because this is a subject which does need to go out, and we do need to be able to acknowledge it. Thank you very much. So thank you very, very much for coming and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for viewing. Other talks from the conference are also available on YouTube.